What if I told you that the world you're living in isn't real? Not because it's fake, but because it's filtered, shaped by your mind before you ever see it. Everything you call reality might just be a projection of your own consciousness. Sounds impossible, right? But one man, a brilliant Mexican scientist named Jacobo Grinberg, spent his life proving exactly that. Jacobo wasn't a mystic or a self-help guru. He was a neurophysiologist and psychologist who studied the brain and consciousness with the precision of a scientist and the curiosity of a philosopher. His mission was simple, but daring, to understand how the mind creates reality itself, and what he discovered shook the boundaries between science and the spiritual world. In his laboratory at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, Grinberg conducted groundbreaking experiments on the human brain. He studied the way thoughts and perceptions connect, not only inside our heads, but between people. His research suggested that two brains separated by distance could still share information through a mysterious field of consciousness. He called this invisible web the lattice or the Syntergic field. According to Grinberg, this field connects every mind, every object, every living thing. It's like an ocean of awareness, and your brain is a receiver, decoding just a small portion of it. You're not seeing the full reality, you're seeing the version your mind can process. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. In 1994, just days before he was about to publish a book that could have changed everything we know about consciousness, Jacobo Grinberg vanished. No trace, no clues, no body, nothing. Some say he was silenced because his work crossed forbidden lines. Others believe he simply stepped into the very field he described, that he merged with the consciousness he studied. So what exactly did he discover that was so dangerous? And why does his research still scare scientists today? In this video, we'll dive deep into Jacobo Grinberg's most shocking discovery, the idea that you are not living in reality as it truly is. We'll explore how your brain builds the world you experience, how consciousness shapes matter, and how understanding this could completely shift the way you live. You'll learn how Grinberg's experiments connected ancient spiritual knowledge with modern neuroscience. You'll discover the strange events that followed his disappearance and the theories that continue to surface today. And most importantly, you'll see how his message might help you awaken from the illusion you call your life. By the end of this video, you'll realize that what you believe to be fixed, solid, and real might be just a reflection of your inner state. And that means, if your mind created it, your mind can also change it. So stay with us till the end, because what you're about to hear could change the way you see everything, including yourself. Welcome to Awakened Synchronicity, the place where science meets consciousness and mystery meets truth. If you're ready to wake up from the illusion, hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey into the mind of Jacobo Grinberg and beyond. Before we talk about the shocking discoveries Jacobo Grinberg made, we need to understand something most people never question: the reality we experience every day. The world you see around you feels solid, clear, and obvious. You see colors, hear sounds, touch objects, and think, this is the real world. But what if that isn't true? What if what you call reality is only a carefully edited version created by your brain? Grinberg believed that what you experience is not the world itself, but a mental construction, a story your brain tells you based on limited information. Think about it for a moment. When you look at a red apple, you might think you're seeing the apple itself, but in truth, your eyes don't see red. They just detect light waves bouncing off the apple's surface. Your brain then translates those light waves into the color you call red. The apple doesn't carry redness in itself. It's your mind assigning that quality to it. This means that every single thing you see, hear, or touch goes through a filter, the filter of your brain. Reality, as Grinberg explained, is not outside you. It's processed inside you. Your mind doesn't simply record the world like a camera. It interprets it. It shapes it. It even fills in the gaps when something is missing. Science already knows that we only perceive a fraction of the information around us. Our eyes can't see all light frequencies. Our ears can't hear all sounds. Our senses are limited, yet our brain creates the illusion of a complete world. It stitches together fragments and fills in what it cannot detect, giving us a stable picture. And because this image feels real, we rarely question it. Grinberg went further. He suggested that these interpretations are not just sensory, they're shaped by belief, emotion, and attention. The world you see depends on what you expect to see. Two people can look at the same situation and experience it completely differently. One sees threat, another sees opportunity. One feels beauty, another feels fear. They are not living in the same world. They are living in two separate versions of reality, created by their individual minds. According to Grinberg's research, this personal filter is influenced by what he called informational patterns. These patterns are built from memories, culture, language, and emotional states. They decide how we decode the vast field of information that surrounds us. In other words, reality is not an external truth, it's a negotiated perception. To make it simpler, imagine walking into a dark room. You can't see anything, but your mind immediately starts guessing what might be there. Maybe a chair, maybe a person, maybe something unknown. When the light turns on, you see what was actually there. But during that moment in the dark, your mind had already built a version of reality based on fear, memory, and imagination. This is what Grinberg believed we all do, all the time. We live in the light of our own interpretations, not in the raw reality itself. He also noticed that ancient spiritual traditions, from meditation to shamanic rituals, were based on breaking through this mental construction. They tried to access a state where perception is no longer filtered by the mind, but directly connected to the underlying field of consciousness. Modern science calls it altered states of awareness. Grinberg called it expanded perception, the ability to see more of the lattice, the field that holds everything. Most people, he said, never reach that level. They remain trapped inside their own projections, convinced that what they see is the whole truth. That's why life seems predictable and limited. It's not reality that's small, it's our perception of it. Jacobo Grinberg's message was simple yet revolutionary. What you think is real might only be a reflection of your own mind. The moment you understand that, everything begins to change. Jacobo Grinberg's greatest contribution to the study of consciousness was something he called the Syntergic theory, a bold attempt to explain how the mind, the brain, and reality itself are connected. It wasn't just another scientific model, it was a bridge between neuroscience, quantum physics, and ancient wisdom. To Grinberg, reality was not made of matter or space as we understand it. Beneath everything we can see and touch lies what he described as the lattice, an invisible pre-space field of pure information. This lattice, he said, is the true foundation of existence. It's not a physical place, but a field that contains all possible structures, all possibilities, all patterns of consciousness. Everything that exists, a rock, a tree, your thoughts, even time itself, arises as an expression of this deeper field. You could imagine it as a vast ocean of invisible energy and intelligence, constantly vibrating and interconnecting everything in existence. Grinberg believed that the human brain does not simply observe this field. It interacts with it, shapes it, and decodes it into the world we experience. In his words, the brain is not a passive receiver. It's an interface between consciousness and the lattice. Every sensation, emotion, and idea you experience is the result of your consciousness interpreting the signals coming from this field. In simpler terms, your brain doesn't just see reality, it creates it moment by moment. Think of it like tuning into a radio frequency. The music already exists as waves in the air, but you can't hear it until you turn the dial. Once you tune to the right frequency, the radio translates those invisible waves into sound. The lattice works in a similar way. It holds endless information about reality, but your brain and consciousness can only tune in to a small fraction of it. That limited version is what you call the real world. According to Grinberg, when your brain and consciousness are aligned, when you are focused, clear and emotionally coherent, your signal from the lattice becomes stronger. You perceive reality with more depth, more clarity, and more connection. But when you are distracted, fearful, or emotionally blocked, the signal weakens and your perception narrows. You see less of what is truly there. You become confined within your own limited projection. This idea changes everything we think we know about life. It means that your personal reality isn't just shaped by what's outside you, it's a mirror of your inner state. Change your consciousness, and your version of reality begins to shift as well. Grinberg's experiments supported this theory. He studied how the brains of two people could synchronize even when separated by distance. In one experiment, two participants sat in different rooms. One was exposed to light flashes, while the other sat in darkness. Astonishingly, both brains showed similar electrical responses. For Grinberg, this was evidence that their minds were connected through the same field. The lattice, consciousness, he said, is not trapped inside the skull. It's part of a shared network of information. Now, if the lattice contains infinite information, why do we only see a narrow band of it? Grinberg answered this simply: because the brain filters out most of it. Just like your eyes can't see infrared light and your ears can't hear ultrasonic sound, your brain can't process the full spectrum of consciousness. It focuses only on what's necessary for survival and everyday function. He called this filtering process the structuring of perception. Every person's structure is different, formed by their beliefs, emotions, memories, and cultural background. These structures act like lenses, bending and shaping the information that flows from the lattice into your awareness. Two people can walk through the same street, but they are not walking in the same world. One may notice the noise, the chaos, and the stress. The other may notice color, rhythm, and beauty. The outer scene is the same, but the inner lens determines the experience. Grinberg emphasized that these lenses are not fixed. They are flexible, and they can be transformed through deep awareness, meditation, or emotional work. You can expand the range of information your brain decodes. You can open new channels of perception, making your personal reality richer and more complete. He also warned that most humans live with very rigid filters. Society, education, religion, and language have taught us what to believe, what to ignore, and what to fear. We've built psychological walls that block out the wider reality. We've been conditioned to trust only what we can measure, see, or touch, even though the most important parts of life, thought, love, intuition, creativity, are invisible. For Grinberg, this blindness was not accidental. He saw it as part of human evolution, a stage where consciousness forgets its connection to the whole so it can rediscover it again through awareness. The tragedy, he said, is that many people never move past this stage. They live and die inside a small corner of an infinite field. When you accept that your version of reality is only a small decoding of something far larger, a quiet revolution begins inside you. You start questioning what's truly real. You stop taking your thoughts and emotions as absolute truth. You begin to sense that behind the noise of daily life, there's something vast and alive, waiting to be perceived. Grinberg suggested that this awareness is the key to human transformation. Once you understand that you are a co-creator of reality, you stop feeling like a victim of circumstances. You stop saying, "Life happens to me," and start realizing, "Life responds to me." You see that your inner world, your emotions, intentions, and beliefs is constantly interacting with the lattice, shaping what you experience in the outer world. This doesn't mean you can simply wish for anything and make it appear. Grinberg's view was deeper than the common idea of manifestation. He said that to truly change your reality, you must change the structure of your consciousness. The lattice responds not to casual thoughts, but to the coherence of your entire being. When your emotions, intentions, and awareness align, you begin to resonate differently with the field, and the world around you reflects that shift. Imagine living in a house with thousands of windows, but you've only opened one. You assume that what you see through that single window is the whole world. Then one day, you open another, and suddenly the landscape changes. More light enters, more detail appears. The house hasn't moved, and neither have you, but your experience expands. That's what happens when you access more of the lattice. The world becomes brighter, deeper, more interconnected. Grinberg was fascinated by people who seemed to naturally tap into this expanded perception, shamans, mystics, and healers. He spent time studying their rituals and meditative states. He found that their brain patterns showed unusual synchronization between both hemispheres, suggesting that their consciousness was operating in a more unified way. In those moments, he believed they were accessing more information from the lattice, perceiving a broader spectrum of reality than the ordinary mind can. He saw this as proof that the brain could be trained to decode higher frequencies of information. The more coherent the mind, the clearer the perception. That's why Grinberg viewed consciousness as a creative force, not a byproduct of the brain. He often said that reality is not something we observe, it's something we participate in. If this is true, then the limits of your reality are not out there, they are inside you. Your beliefs, fears, and expectations are like passwords that grant or deny access to certain layers of the lattice. When you believe the world is dangerous, your mind tunes into information that confirms danger. When you believe life is abundant, you tune into opportunities. Both experiences exist within the field. Your consciousness chooses which one to decode. Grinberg's theory offers both mystery and responsibility. It suggests that everything is connected through the same underlying field, but also that each individual shapes their corner of it through their perception. The boundaries between the personal and the universal blur. You are not a separate observer. You are a participant in the constant creation of reality. When you start to live with this awareness, small things begin to change. You notice coincidences that feel too precise to be random. You sense moods and intentions in others, without words. Time feels more flexible. Reality begins to respond to your state of mind as if it were alive, because according to Grinberg, it is. He believed that once enough people awakened to this truth, humanity could collectively expand its consciousness. Wars, greed, and suffering, he said, all come from the illusion of separation, from forgetting that we are part of the same lattice. When that illusion dissolves, cooperation replaces conflict, empathy replaces fear, and the human mind rediscovers its creative power. So, if reality is not fixed but fluid, what does that mean for you? It means that your inner work is not just personal growth, it's world creation. Every time you shift your perception, the field itself responds. Every time you move from fear to awareness, you change the signal you send into the lattice. And in ways science is only beginning to glimpse, the lattice sends something back. Jacobo Grinberg's Syntergic theory wasn't meant to be a philosophy. It was an invitation to see beyond the illusion of limits and remember that consciousness is not trapped inside your head. It is vast, shared, and powerful. You are not living in the full reality yet, but the key to it has always been within you. Jacobo Grinberg wasn't satisfied with abstract theories. He wanted proof, real, measurable evidence that consciousness could interact across distance and that the human mind was not isolated inside the skull. To explore this, he designed a series of bold and unconventional experiments that shocked both his supporters and his critics. The most famous of these were his brain-to-brain correlation studies conducted in the late 1980s and early 1990s. In one of these experiments, two participants would enter a lab and sit together for a period of time. They would meditate, focus on connection, and synchronize their breathing until they felt emotionally and mentally attuned to each other. Then, Grinberg would separate them into two isolated rooms, ensuring there was no possible way for them to communicate. One participant would then be exposed to light flashes or sound pulses while their brain activity was monitored through EEG sensors. The other participant, sitting in silence and darkness, would also have their brain activity recorded. To the astonishment of those who saw the results, both brains often showed matching patterns of activity. Even though one person was receiving the stimulus and the other was not, their brain waves appeared to mirror each other. This synchronization seemed to defy classical neuroscience. How could one brain react to an event happening to another person in another room? Grinberg believed the answer was the lattice, the invisible field of information that connects all consciousness. To him, these experiments proved that minds could communicate through this deeper layer of reality. The physical separation between the participants didn't matter, because consciousness itself was not limited by space or distance. He extended these studies by working with experienced meditators and healers. When two advanced practitioners focused on shared intention or compassion, their brain patterns became even more synchronized. It was as if their minds merged into a single coherent field. Grinberg documented these results carefully, aware that mainstream science would be skeptical. He published papers, gave lectures, and insisted that the phenomenon wasn't paranormal, but natural, a result of consciousness interacting with the lattice. But his research went beyond laboratories. Grinberg was fascinated by the practices of Mexican shamans and indigenous healers, who seemed to access extraordinary states of awareness. He believed their ancient rituals weren't just symbolic. They were methods for tuning consciousness to higher frequencies of the lattice. During his fieldwork, he observed how shamans could describe distant events, communicate telepathically, and even influence physical outcomes through intention. One of his most well-known collaborations was with a shaman named Pichita, a healer famous for performing psychic surgeries using only her hands. Witnesses, including medical doctors, reported that she could extract and replace organs without tools, and that her patients would recover with no sign of trauma. To many, these stories sounded impossible, but Grinberg didn't dismiss them. Instead, he sought to understand them scientifically. He theorized that Pichita was able to restructure the informational patterns within the lattice. In his model, the physical body is just one manifestation of these patterns. If someone could consciously interact with the lattice, they could potentially modify the body's structure at its most fundamental level. In other words, what we call healing might actually be a realignment of the underlying field of information. This interpretation was radical. It blurred the line between science and mysticism. Grinberg wasn't claiming that magic was real. He was suggesting that our current science was too limited to explain the deeper mechanics of consciousness. He often said that shamanic practices, meditation, and advanced states of awareness were not supernatural. They were supernatural, natural processes that occur when the mind expands beyond its usual filters. As his experiments continued, he began to notice a pattern. The more coherent and focused a person's mind was, the stronger their connection to others became. Chaos and distraction weakened the link, stillness and unity strengthened it. This, he said, was the essence of consciousness, a field that organizes itself through coherence. The higher the coherence, the closer we come to perceiving the true nature of the lattice. However, Grinberg's work was deeply controversial. Many scientists dismissed it as pseudoscience. They argued that his results could be due to experimental error or coincidence. Funding became difficult, yet despite the criticism, he continued to publish and present, convinced that one day the scientific world would catch up. What made his theories compelling wasn't only the data, it was the consistency across cultures and experiences. He saw the same principles in neuroscience, quantum theory, and ancient spirituality. For Grinberg, the message was clear. The mind is not a prisoner of the brain, and reality is not as solid as it appears. Consciousness is the primary fabric of existence. The physical world is secondary, a projection or decoding of deeper informational fields. Now, what does this mean for you, living your everyday life? It means that your perception shapes your experience more than you think. When you become aware of how your mind filters information, you begin to see how often you live on autopilot, reacting to your own assumptions instead of reality itself. Start with small moments. When you feel anger, ask yourself, is this the full truth? Or is my mind interpreting this moment through an old lens? When you feel fear, ask, is this danger real? Or is it my conditioning reacting to uncertainty? Every time you pause like this, you momentarily step outside the illusion. You begin to see the lattice in action, how your beliefs shape what you see. Meditation, mindfulness, and self-inquiry are not just relaxation techniques. They are tools for refining perception. They quiet the noise of the mind, allowing you to tune into deeper levels of awareness. When you practice presence, you strengthen the coherence of your consciousness. Over time, your world subtly changes, not because the external world shifts first, but because your decoding of it becomes clearer. Grinberg encouraged people to experiment with consciousness as if it were a living science. You don't need a lab. All you need is awareness. Try observing coincidences in your life, moments that seem too aligned to be random. Notice how your internal state influences your outer experiences. Pay attention to how your energy changes the energy of a room. These are the practical signs of the lattice interacting with you. Yet not everyone is ready for this kind of awakening. Grinberg often said that the biggest barrier to expanded perception is psychological comfort. It's unsettling to realize that your reality might not be solid, that the world you trust could be a kind of shared dream. Most people prefer the safety of a predictable world, even if it's limited. Systems like education, media, and social norms reinforce this stability. They teach us that reality is fixed, measurable, and external. They reward logic and dismiss intuition. This conditioning keeps the collective perception stable, but it also keeps it small. To question it can feel like a threat to one's identity. If reality is flexible, then responsibility increases. You're no longer just a passenger, you're a co-creator. And that's a heavy realization for the ego to accept. That's why many resist it. They label ideas like Grinberg's as fantasy or delusion. Not because they lack evidence, but because they challenge the foundation of how people understand themselves. It's easier to live in a world where things happen to you than in one where everything you experience is partly shaped by you. But even for those willing to explore, Grinberg offered a caution. The discovery that reality is malleable does not mean that anything goes. Consciousness is creative, yes, but it is also interconnected. Every thought, emotion, or action ripples through the field, influencing others. If you use this awareness to manipulate or escape, the lattice reflects that distortion back to you. The same law that allows healing also holds you accountable. He warned against confusing expanded perception with delusion. Just because you can change your inner world doesn't mean you can ignore the outer one. The goal, he said, is integration, to remain grounded in the physical while awake to the deeper layers beneath it. Balance is the key. Meditation without humility leads to ego inflation. Awareness without compassion leads to isolation. Grinberg's life was an example of this balance. Though he explored the mystical, he never abandoned scientific discipline. He believed true spirituality must meet reason halfway. His legacy reminds us that awakening is not about escaping the world, but seeing it more clearly as a living network of consciousness in which we all participate. So as you move through your day, remember this: reality is both a mirror and a message. What you perceive is not the end of truth, it's the beginning of your relationship with it. Your task is to refine that relationship, to see more of what's actually there, and to live from that awareness. When you do, your perception becomes your power. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop seeking control and begin cultivating connection. You realize that every breath, thought, and emotion is part of a larger dance, the dance of the lattice that Grinberg spent his life trying to reveal. And though many dismissed him, though his disappearance left questions that may never be answered, his work continues to whisper a simple truth. The borders of your reality are not at the edge of the universe. They're at the edge of your perception. Expand that, and the world expands with you. You're not living in raw reality. You're living inside a version your mind and culture have built for you. Every belief and perception filters what you call the world. Jacobo Grinberg's work reminds us that what we see isn't the full picture. It's a personal projection shaped by our mind. But once you realize this, everything changes. You stop being a passive observer and start becoming a conscious creator. Reality isn't fixed, it's fluid. It responds to awareness. So here's your invitation. Choose to wake up. Begin by questioning one belief you hold about yourself or your life. Ask, is this truly real, or just what I've been taught to see? That small act can open the door to a bigger, clearer reality. Awakening doesn't mean escaping the world. It means seeing it with new eyes. When your perception shifts, your world follows. If this message inspired you or made you think differently, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Awaken Synchronicity for more on Jacobo Grinberg's powerful teachings and the path of expanded consciousness. Remember, your world changes the moment you change how you perceive it.